Our next speaker, Francis Lee, is here just for this, just for you. But he's counting on you because he needs you to amplify his voice. Actually, he's a YouTube star. But he needs to reach your students, and so he'll need your assistance. But he flew in just for this, and right after, he's flying out again. So it's special that we have him here. Now, we talked before about technology and its role in US-China relations. You folks use your fingers on your phones. His companies help to make that possible. So when you read about, he's involved in interfaces and these kinds of things, that's what we're talking about. Not just on phones, but on a whole slew of devices that are life-changing, and in some instances, life-giving, right? Really remarkable stuff. He has this long career in semiconductors as well as in these interfaces. He's led companies in Asia, in Hong Kong, and here in the United States. When I mentioned he's a YouTube star, he has a fewer followers than some of the celebrities that Dr. So made reference to. But I'm one of them. After I learned he was going to be here, I sought his videos out because he's been sharing his ideas about leadership and entrepreneurship with a whole lot of interested folks. And here he's going to be talking about the China difference, what China's rise means for technology, and also what technology means in China's rise. I'm really looking forward to his talk. Won't you welcome him? Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. He is really way too kind in that introduction here. Okay, good morning, everybody. Like he said, when they invited me in 1990 to do this discussion, even though I'm not sure I'm the best qualified person, I have to do it because the teachers are here. And to me, I got a lot of respect for teachers because other than parents, the teacher is probably the most influential people in a kid's life. So hopefully in today's talk, I share with you some of my perspectives in terms of technology development. But don't be shy. So stop me and ask questions because I don't want this to be a monologue here. And hopefully, through today's discussion, you get a bit of insight about how technology is being developing in China. So let me run a poll. Who has visited China? Wow, a lot of people. Who has visited China in the last 12 months? Less, but still, quite a few. Okay, let me share with you, in my last 12 months, where have I been in China? I did a Tibet trip in 2018. As a matter of fact, I'm going to share with you a story about that trip. I visited a place called Zhenjiang, which is, if you had any vinegar, in Chinese restaurant, that's the vinegar capital. And then I was in Kunming and Shenzhen and visited a company called Huawei, which I'm sure you heard about. And in May, I was in Xi'an, Beijing, Shanghai. And then later this month, I'll be traveling with a bunch of friends to the Silk Road trip. The Professor So talked about, a trip a while ago. So my first trip in China was 1981. That was when a radio institute, I think it was Radio Institute number 19 in China. Every factory, they call Radio Institute in those days. So my wife and I went there, and they invited me to talk about semiconductors at that time. For those of you that might have known China at that time, they will start building the airport called Hongqiao Airport, right? And it's the first major city that my wife and I went to. When you get a boarding pass, there's no lounges. You actually stood there and wait for you to board the plane. So that was way back there. And when you go to Shanghai, there was no such thing as a bund. There was the Wangpu River. So China, I've seen China up close and personal, either through business or through personal experience for a number of years. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, through my eyes, how they have changed. So this is a map, okay, of my various trips. And I want to share with you a personal story about my trip to Tibet in 2018, which kind of talks a little bit about the progresses and the challenges facing China. So in this trip, basically, my friend picked me up from the Hong Kong airport, and we drove through 6 provinces before we entered Tibet. So there was a lot of driving. And we have 2 cars, SUVs, and my friend asked me to share the driving because it's just a long road. In China, when you have to drive, you have to get a China driver license. They don't recognize international driver license. I happen to have a driver license in Hong Kong, and it's actually relatively easy, and I underscore relatively, to get this driver license in China. So I asked my friend, how do you do it? He said, you want to know the simple way or the hard way? So tell me the simple way first. So he said, you gave 1,000 RMB to an agent, meaning bribe, and he'll do all this for you. And you get it, the next day. So I'm trying to be a good global citizen and not try to encourage corruption in China, right? So what is the hard way to do this? Well, the hard way to do this, I happen to have a friend in China. He said, you go to the internet, you go to the website, here are the things you got to do. I said, okay, do it that way. And my friend was kind enough to lend me his driver. So actually, I had local people driving me around. And it's like 6 or 7 step process. And because I've done business in China before, and I know things happen in China, so I allocated 3 days to do my Chinese driver license. Even though theoretically, I can get it all done in 1 day. So I got in the first day. The guy picked me up, and I registered a local address. I was using my friend's address in Shenzhen. I went to the police department, registered a local address. Then I went to the hospital to get my vision check and all this stuff. Then I went to a studio place where they take my mugshot, okay? And all of this was very smooth. As a matter of fact, I got to the equivalent of the DMV ahead of schedule. So my appointment there was 12 to 5. I can go see. A big range, right? But anyway, I got there by noon, and I was really happy. So I showed them all the stuff that I've done. I said, is this the right procedure? He said, you are, but you come to the wrong office. I said, it's on the website. This is one of the offices. He said, no. There's only 2 offices in here, in the Shenzhen area that do this thing. I said, which one is it? He said, there's one in Luowu, and there's one in Xili. For those of you that might know a little bit about it, Luowu is just outside of Kowloon, and it's relatively easy to get to, but it's actually a very small office, and you have to make an appointment. And it takes like months to make this appointment. Xili, on the other side, is about 40 minutes to an hour, depending on traffic. And it's got a big office, and you can make the appointment there. So I said, okay, no big deal. Now in China, now this is part of the progresses they have done now. If you want to make an appointment, you have to first go to a computer. And then you say, I want to make an appointment. Then they send you back a code on your phone. And then with this phone, it's just like a banking, right? A passcode. Then you go there and you make this appointment. Now, this is the equivalent of the DMV, right? All the computers in that DMV was down that day. None of them was working. So I cannot make this appointment. But my driver said, don't worry about it. I will make this appointment for you the next day when I got home. So okay, that was my first day. So I was having dinner with my friend, the local friend that was loaning me this driver. So I explained to him this problem. He said, you probably see Mr. Koch. I said, who is Mr. Koch? Mr. Koch is in charge of the entire police department in Shenzhen. I mean, he's a big shot. I said, why? He said, well, I don't know. You better need some insurance. I said, no. Your driver already told me. He booked this appointment in Sealy already. So next day at 9 o'clock, I went to this equivalent of the DMV. It's a big building. Lots of people were there. And by the way, when you walk to this building, there's very obvious sign about no corruption, don't do anything of this. Very obvious. Very obvious. So now I'm wondering, where are these people that would do 1,000 RMB? Later on, I find out where they are. So I wait in line. I presented the stuff, and I said, I want to get my Chinese driver license. And the guy looked at all, yeah, you have all the right stuff, but you made the appointment in the wrong department in this building. I said, what do you mean? In the website, it says, no. This is the department you got to go to. So, okay. So I go to the computer again, my friend, or the driver. We found out that there was an appointment in the afternoon. I said, oh, no big deal, right? At 2:30. I said, we just have lunch and come back. And then we find out we couldn't make this appointment until you cancel the last appointment. And by the time we cancel the last appointment, there's no more appointment left for that day. None. So now I'm really worried. Because the next day, I said, what else could happen? So I said, I better call Mr. Koch. So I called Mr. Koch, and I say, look, I don't want to do anything funny. I just need an appointment. And Mr. Koch said, let me have lunch now, and I will tell you what I can do in about an hour. So an hour later, he sent me back a text. Go see Mr. Zhao. Mr. Zhao is in charge of the entire DMV. This poor guy, all I need is an appointment. So I said, okay. So I went after lunch, I went to the office, and I say, here's a text. I need to see Mr. Zhao. And the security guard looked at me, and he said, you need an appointment, don't you? So clearly, I'm not the first guy that did this stuff, right? I said, yes, I do need an appointment. He said, go to window 99. So when you go to the DMV, it's kind of like a DMV here. You have this big screen that they tell you, right? Your number's up, you go to certain windows, right? So I go to window 99, and I say, the guard just sent me here. I want to get, my Chinese driver license. And the guy looked at me and say, how old are you? I said, what the heck have they do? How old am I here? So I said, I'm 66. And the guy said, once you pass the age of 65, you don't need any appointments. You can just come. This is China. They tell you everything about what to do in the website, and they leave out some minor details. Now, 10 years ago, you would not even be able to find any of this stuff on the website. So it's progress is in one way. Then you start scratching your head. Why don't you just put in big block letter, right? Over age of 65, you don't need appointment. So I get all my stuff done. I was happy. So I said, all you have to do is pay now. So I go to the payment line. They don't accept cash, and they don't accept credit card. And those are the only two things I have. I said, what do you accept? Well, we can take WeChat Pay, and we can take Alipay. I don't have any of those. So I turn and look at the driver. I said, can you pay for me, and I'll pay you? So I actually have a movable ATM there. And the reason why I want to share this story with you as a backdrop is China is moving extremely fast, right? So I'm going to talk about this rise in technology with three topics, okay? First is who is winning the race between US and China, because US is kind of like the gold standard, right, in the world in terms of technology. Secondly is what enables technology development, because if you have the right catalyst to do that, eventually, right, you'll surge ahead. And lastly is what the implication of the current technology development. And a bulk of my talk is actually going to be in the first one to give you some perspectives in terms of what's happening in China in technology development. But before I do that, let me give you some comparison between USA and China. Now, most of this data you probably already know, but let me just show it to you anyway. So the per capita income in China is $8,000. In the US is $56,000. By the way, Shanghai and Beijing is more than $20,000. And most of the news that we see in television or reading is actually from major cities. So the kind of provinces that Dr. So talked about in Gansu, in Qinghai, those are a lot more poorer than in Shanghai and Beijing. The area of China is about 3.7 million square miles, and is a tiny bit smaller than US, and basically is almost the size of Europe. Now, the population is about 1.4 billion people, and is about, how many times? Almost more than 4 times the size of US. But I'm sure you have heard the Chinese population is peaking at 2027 because of the one-child policy that was implemented a few decades ago. And in the US, we'll probably surpass 400 million. But a big part of that is because of immigrations. As a matter of fact, when I was going to school, there's a lot of foreign students, and a significant number of them end up staying in the US because this is the land of the liberty, freedom, the quality of life, the business opportunities, and so on and so forth. So immigration policy has a lot to do with the rate of growth of the US populations. The reason why I put this slide out here is when people think about China, a lot of people think about China as being a homogeneous country. But you never think about Europe as being a homogeneous country, right? There's many languages, right? Many barriers, many boundaries. But China is exactly the same. It's made up of multiple ethnic races, right? And I mean, my father came from a village in Guangdong, and even a few miles, they don't even speak the same verbal languages, right? So when I was in Beijing in May, a guy that lives there talked about something that I can really relate to. He said, if you're a foreigner, you visit China for 1 week, you think you can write a book on China. If you visit for 1 month, then you realize all I can do is write a chapter. And if you go there for a year, you said, I couldn't write anything about China anymore because it's changing too fast, right? So it's with that backdrop that I want to talk a little bit about technology because it's evolving very fast. So my first topic is who is winning the current technology race? US or China? Now I'm going to run a poll. Who thinks US is winning the technology race? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The longer I walk, okay, who thinks that China is winning a technology race? Wow, a lot more people. Okay. Before I do that, let me just do a simple definition of technology, because technology means different things to different people, right? So I'm not suggesting this is a gold standard in terms of how you define technology, but it's just a pretty easy way for people to understand. So technology, in this definition, is just collection and knowledges of skills, processes, techniques, to produce goods or services. So in this sense, I cast a technology as a pretty wide net, right? Now, it's hard to say who is ahead there because of this wide definition. And the best analogy I can give you is like a personal health system. If I ask you, are you healthy? Now, it's a lot easier to say if you're not, because they already done the diagnostic, something is wrong with you, right? But if you have not done any of the diagnostics, there is many subsystems in the human body. There is the respiratory, the pulmonary, the digestive, the cardiovascular, right? I mean, like the Professor So talked about, I mean, lots of people have hepatitis. They didn't even know about it. So you're healthy or not, I don't know, depending on whether the thing is going to kill you. So lots of us do the annual health checkup. And you do the health checkup, you do some blood tests, and you waited for maybe half an hour to wait for the doctor to come in. And the doctor say, everything is within range. You're very happy. You run away. Oh, good. I'll wait another year to see it. But you really do not know unless you do some exhaustive diagnostics, right? So when you think about technology, I just want you to think about it is not an easy question to answer. Who is winning? So in that sense, both of the posts are right, in the sense that if you see US is winning or that China is winning, okay? Because it's evolving very, very fast. But there are some things in here that I'll take you back to that could be helpful in terms of you thinking about this technology. So let me just quickly take you through the evolution of the technology in this valley here. So in the 60s and 70s is the semiconductors, right? I mean, as a matter of fact, that is why this place got the name Silicon Valley, because the basic ingredient of semiconductor is silicon. And silicon is actually have the same composition as sand in the beaches. This is why they call this a Silicon Valley. And I started my career in semiconductors. Then in the 1980s is personal computers and a little bit of biotechnology. As a matter of fact, if you bought one share of Microsoft and one share of Intel in 1980, you'll be very happy today, because those stocks have skyrocketed, you know, because of the PC. Then the 1990s is when the cell phones start coming out. So when the cell phone comes out, each generation of cell phone, you know, when you think about cell phone, you think about it as a communication devices. You think of computer as a computing devices. The later generation of the cell phone blurs the line between communication and computing anymore, right? And then in 2000, this is the internet. This is where, you know, our Vice President Al Gore talked about the information superhighway, right? And then in 2010, this is the time of the social media, the Facebooks, right, of the world, the Twitter, and so on and so forth. So when you look at this technology evolution and the history of it, and I'll talk a little bit about semiconductor first. I realize some of you might not have seen what a semiconductor looks like. Okay, so I brought some here. I can pass it around. So this is what's called a wafer. And when I started my career, it was 1.5 inch. That was the diameter of this wafer. And then I have 4 chips, which is basically the integrated circuit that make out the semiconductors. And those chips are actually used in our product in Synaptics. It's got a few million transistors in it. Now, can you just pass it around, please? Now, over time, since 1.5 inch wafers, they have now moved to 12-inch wafers, which is the size of a pizza. You think about it. Now, I have with me a silicon wafer that is about 5 inches in diameters. And what you see is grids in it, and each of the grid is basically one integrated circuit. Okay? So you can see that this 5-inch wafers is a lot bigger than a 1.5 inch, and 12-inch in terms of area is a lot bigger than 5-inch, right? So when we did this 5-inch wafer, we thought, my God, this thing is big. Well, until now, it's 12-inch now, right? And this is significant because every time when you increase the wafer size, you can pack more integrated circuit into each of the same wafer, right? So when you produce the wafers in the batches, you become a lot more, you know, efficient and productive. And when you do that, the cost starts dropping. start dropping really fast. And the other thing that caused it to improve is what I call the resolution and processing. Resolution is what they call the live width that they can print on these wafers. And today, the state of the art is 14 nanometers. Just to put it in perspective, a nanometer is a billionth of a meter. An average paper is about 100 times, 100,000 larger than a nanometer. So these are line widths that are very, very tiny. And the reason why the line width become tiny is you can pack more circuits into the same square areas. So this improvement in processing, I'm sure some of you heard about the Moore's law. So Gordon Moore is one of the founders of Intel. And he plotted through successive years, and he predicted that circuits can increase in orders of magnitudes in about 18 months. And I'm going to show you a graph in a minute. And then the 2D and 3D processing further increase the capacity. So instead of just a two-dimensional, they start storing charges in the sidewall and all this and that. So what that means here is more and more powerful computer chips can be packed in the same wafer, in the same areas. And when you do that, you can have a lot more complicated circuits built into it. So today, the 14 nanometer technology is being driven by a lot of the communication chips. I'm sure I'm going to talk a little bit about the 5G telephone, cell phone later, or the 4G telephone, 3G telephone. I mean, all of those are fueled by this technology in terms of improving the communication computing capabilities. And then you can have higher resolution of displays. And by the way, when you think about the displays, they also have this, 5G, 6G, 7, factories, in terms of displays. And when you can do that, this is where we got rid of all the bulky CRT displays into LCD displays. And we move from LCD displays to organic, LED displays. And this is where you can start folding your display now. So with all of this improvement of technology allows you to build many, many different types of gadgets. And a lot of it you see every day in the valley today. Now this is the Moore's law on a graph. Know that on the y-axis is not linear, it's exponential. And the x-axis is number of years. So by 2016, you can actually pack 20 billion transistors onto a chip. 20 billion transistors. Now, for those of us like myself who still remember the transistor radios, okay, you know what that looks like, right? And in 1995, we can only pack 1 million transistors on the same chip. Just think about the progresses over the horizon. And the more transistor you can pack into it is linearly proportional to, actually may not be linear, but it's certainly proportional to the number of functions that you can do. And to put it in perspective, I'm going to show you the effect of this on the cost of memories. When I was in semiconductors, memory was a big deal because, look at us here, right? All of us don't have enough memory. I mean it psychologically. No. But the fact of the matter is, we store things, okay? And you never erase them, okay? And I certainly wish I could do a better job in my brain memory here. But this is cost of memory per megabyte. And on the y-axis, again, it's an exponential scale. On the x-axis is number of years, right? You can see the price, how much it drops. Today, there's actually only 2 memory suppliers in the world. I don't know if you guys know about it. There is Seagate Technology, and there's Western Digital. Because people find it very hard to make money in the memories because of how fast the prices drop. Now, we as consumers loves it because, cheaper is better for all of us, right? When I was in the semiconductors, the first guy to come up with the denser memory makes money. Second guy breaks even. The third guy loses a shirt. So if you go to the website today and say that I want to buy a terabyte drive, when I was going to school, a terabyte is astronomical figures. I said, who needs a terabyte? How much is a terabyte today? You're going to go to Walmart and buy it for $13, and it's free delivery. Free delivery. I just look it up in the website. You know what that means is 1.3 pennies per 1,000 megabytes. So, and this is what semiconductor has done in the technology as a user from memories. So who has won the semiconductor race? No doubt about it. U.S. has won. U.S. is the birthplace of the semiconductors. When I started in the Valley in the 70s, there are so many semiconductor companies. Literally, you can turn around and then you find another, company. By the way, almost all of that is gone, other than probably one or two or three. Intel is probably one of the few that are remaining. So U.S. has won and has got very strong implications. And I'm going to explain to you why the semiconductor is so important in a minute. So if you look at the semiconductor consumption in China, China produced less than 50% of the semiconductor they use. Semiconductor is the largest input by value. It's more than oil. They import from outside China. So you can tell how important and how deficient they are in terms of semiconductors. So they are trying to catch up. Now, let me say a little bit about the industry for a minute. As exciting as semiconductor is, industry is also maturing and consolidating. And it's continue to consolidate every day. Again, when I was in the semiconductors, it's kind of started moving out of the area. First is you move all the lower end assembly and test to Asia. And eventually, you move the fab also out of the Silicon Valley. So today, what is remaining in the valley here, besides Intel, even Intel, the fab is actually shrinking. It's mostly design houses. So when I say design houses, because the manufacturing facility, which is also called fabrication facility, is very expensive. To build a state-of-the-art 14 nanometer fab probably costs you upward of $20 billion. So when I say 10 billion, it's actually a low ball figure, talk about. And the challenge of building a fab like that is it takes a long time for you to recuperate the investment. So what the industry has turned into is basically bifurcating between a fab and a fabless semiconductors. T.J. Rogers, who is the founder of Cypress Semiconductor, used to say, real men must have fabs. Well, guess what? Cypress don't have any fab anymore because it's just too expensive. Each generation of the fab requires more and more investments. The Intel is the only meaningful exception, except the fab at Intel, actually they're being used for internal consumptions. They don't really build for outside people. And when you look at fab, it's very capital intensive. When you look at fabless, which is the design of the chips, it's actually very software and intellectual property intensive. So when you bifurcate it, China is investing heavily to catch up. They're buying US companies, for example. They're forming joint ventures because they realize this is a matter of national security to the Chinese. As a matter of fact, the other way to think about semiconductor is the equivalent to steel in the industrial revolutions, because without that, you really cannot do much of anything. So the US has actually reacted to making it harder and harder for China to invest in technology companies. It's making it harder for China to buy US semiconductor companies. I'm sure you have heard the news about there is this organization called CFIUS in the US government that are looking at every deal, make sure that scrutinizing it and rejecting almost all the deal now that has anything to do with Chinese involvement in technology companies and certainly in semiconductor companies. But China realized that they have to catch up. They don't have a choice. So here are some of the foundries. The world's largest foundry is TSMC. It stands for Taiwan Semiconductor Corporations. That's the largest foundries in the world. UMC and Global Foundries are not too far behind. UMC and TSMC are actually Taiwanese companies. Design is software and IP intensive, so you have a couple companies in the valley called Cadence and Synaptics. They are basically design tool houses that help people to put a circuit from paper into silicon designs. High Silicon is a company in China that's also fabless and is trying to do a lot of the fabless, do a lot of electronic circuit designs. Now, if you buy into the fact that Taiwan eventually becomes China one day, which is what China claims, right? So they actually have two of the largest fab in the world. The other important distinction about China in the rest of the world is when China look at those big investment, billion-dollar investment, they think of it as a national prerogative that they have to build it. So they actually spend a lot of money, state government money, to build it. Versus in other parts of the world is more like a private enterprise. And you have to raise funding and do all that stuff to support it, right? So China is catching up, and there is no doubt in my mind that one day the gap will get closer and closer and closer between the two. So now, with that semiconductor out of the way, I'm going to talk about some of the related developments in either technology or technology development in China. And a lot of this development is just happened in the last decade. So first of all, before I do that, how many of you heard about made in, yes?
I was just wondering, where is China getting the materials right now?
Material, you mean like silicon wafers?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Outside of China?
They can get it. They do it in China. Okay, they also procure it from outside China. Getting the material is not the biggest problem. It's really the technologies. Okay, the equipment, right? The equipment to produce wafers in the fab, right? The technology, right? To do the design. Like the ARM that I didn't mention. ARM is actually a licensing company in UK, okay? That has a microprocess design that they have to license that, to put into the circuits. Yeah. So made in China 2025. How many of you heard about that? Okay, a number of you, okay? So in 10 years ago, in 2015, it was a plan, a strategic plan. Talk about it in public, that's what China going to do. And there are three very important elements in it. The first is they're going to move away from low value added factory and move to a lot higher value product and services. So think of it as the early stages of electronic. They're more like a screwdriver plane, right? You go in there, you do simple stuff. you do soldering, you do all that. They're saying, we're going to move away from that. We're going to produce some high-value goods and services. The second thing they talk about is they want to increase the domestic content from what it is now to 40% by next year and to 70% by 2025. And the areas that they want to focus in are like pharmaceuticals, automotive, aerospace, semiconductors, information technology, and robotics. Now, if you look at the list, those are the up-and-coming differences in technologies, right? And that's what they say. They make it public. That's what I'm going to do in China. And our China policy is going to gear towards that. And then they say in the 100th anniversary, by 2049, the 100-year anniversary of the founding of the new Republic of China, they want to achieve a dominant position in the global market. Now, this is a very audacious goal that they talk about. Okay? Now, before I move to the next area of mobile phone, I just want you to step away and think about that for a minute. This is a very autocratic country. The central government says, I'm going to do this. It will get done, right? So I'm sure you guys heard about the Three Gorges Dam. I can assure you there's no other countries in the world that can build it other than China for several reasons. First of all, if it happened in the US, we still will be doing environmental studies. And secondly, I visited the dam twice when they were being constructed. They're literally moving mountains. They were chopping out mountains to make cement right next door to this dam to make it. Now, the Yangtze River has been a flood problem for thousands of years. When you look at the history of China, every emperor, everybody has been trying to fix the Yangtze River floods. And the only solution that they figure it out is they have to build a dam. By building this dam, they raised the water level 125 meters upstream. They bury cities. They bury historical relics. Gone. Anywhere else with that, you think it would be crazy. They would not allow you to do that. Okay? As a matter of fact, a lot of people say if you want to destroy China, all you have to do is destroy the dam, because all the water will come out, will wipe out millions of people, in China. But yet it gets done. And it gets done because, when the central government says something gets done, there is no other debate. It just gets done, right? And so when people look at this kind of a thing, right, the closest I can come to in the US is when President Kennedy talked about, I'm going to put somebody in the moon before the end of the decade, right? And they're from NASA and things happen. It's a really long-range planning tools, which is what they talk about they would do. Now, then I'm going to give you a few very specific sectors in terms of how all the semiconductors have changed, us and also changed China. So first I'll talk about is mobile phone. The total mobile phone user is about 4 times more in China than the United States. Now, China has got 1.4 billion people. Almost 1 billion of it has a cell phone. You look at that and say, wow, how did that happen? They have one advantage that we didn't have. They did not have landlines. We do. So as a matter of fact, I would say 25, 30 years ago, when my friends were building factories in China, they have a tough time of getting telephones. So one of my friends, they pay a lot of money to get landlines, and they find out a lot of landlines don't really work. So he go to the local telephone office to complain. And what he saw was people were unplugging and plugging the different lines, like you're operating in a hotel, because they don't have enough landlines, and they collected the money. So they just kind of multiplexing one landline for multiple companies. That's what they're doing. So once a cell phone becomes available, everybody switch because they don't have to worry about the landline. So they solve all the landline problems. Now, in October 2014, the number of cell phones actually exceeded the global populations. So the one thing that I worry most when I travel is I lost my cell phone. You guys agree with that? I mean, all my information are there. All my pictures are there, right? Now, I'm going to show you some supplier of the cell phone. The number one supplier in the world is Samsung. Number two is Huawei. And you don't even see any Huawei phone in the US unless you procure it outside here. Number three is Apple. Now, here is the cell phone suppliers picture between 2017 and 2018. I have listed the top 5 cell phone suppliers in the world. 3 of the top 5 is Chinese cell phone suppliers. When you add up Huawei, Xiaomi, and Oppo, they own 1/3 of the world's market. Samsung and iPhone added together is the other 1/3 of the market. Then the other, remaining 1/3 is divvied up with a bunch of people. Motorola is no longer there anymore. Remember Motorola used to be one of the, do you see Nokia? No. Do you see Ericsson? No. Right? And you look at the year-over-year change, Huawei has improved almost 41% from 2017 to 2018. Xiaomi, almost 50%. Oppo, about 5%. And they're doing this at the demise of Samsung and the demise of the other people, right? So the strength of the Chinese cell phone supplier is really increasing by leaps and bounds. And I don't believe this is going to be abated. I think all you're going to see is China will continue to dominate the cell phone market. So when you look at cell phone evolution, 1G, how many of you guys know that cell phone has actually started in the Nordic countries? Anybody know? She does. It's actually from, in the boats, people are using that, And this is where the cell phone first started, is in Nordic countries. So the 1G, they make communication possible, right? Remember those 1G phones? They're huge, right? They cost a lot of money. The 2G phones, 10 years later, allowed them to have more secure phone calls and introduce mobile text messaging. That was the era when people talk about the feature phones from the dumb phones. That was started in 2G. Then the 3G started the smartphone areas, right? And this is where you start having a display and get rid of all the keyboards and stuff like that because you want a big display. You can see a lot of things. And then 4G facilitated high-speed connections that made it possible for you to stream videos. So it's no longer pictures anymore. Now, I could have said something about the imager quality that kind of obsoleted all the portable cameras. I could have talked about it, get rid of all the GPS devices, because right now they're all on the phones. So together with all that, it makes a lot of changes in terms of how we run ourselves, right, in our daily lives. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 5G. People talk about 5G all the time. What is this 5G animal? 5G has 3 significant advantages. First of all, it's faster speed. It's 10 times faster than 4G. Not a little bit, 10 times. So think about a high-definition movie that used to take 10 minutes. Now it will take you seconds to download. So the minute you can do that, you can do a lot of other things, okay, which I'll talk a little bit about later. The second thing that you may not realize that make the big change is the shorter delays. This is another thing what people call latency. This is where you touch the telephone and it seems like forever for the phone to react to you, and you touch it many times, right, as it will make a difference, but it really does not. The 5G improves your latency. So it makes it possible to see things real time with none of the millisecond delays. And then he has increased connectivities, right? So the technology in 5G actually can connect multiple devices in the same time. So think about it as a more robust system, it's faster, and they give you more capacity. So now the question is, what do you do with that capabilities? I'll give you a few examples here. First of all is, because of those three things, you can seamlessly work with a whole bunch of sensors, vehicle-to-vehicle communications, smart traffic lights. Today's traffic lights are pretty dumb, right? You have a sensor, your car gets to the sensor, it kind of knows about it. But there's really no reason that they cannot get smarter, right, depending on traffic patterns. Okay? Smart energy grids. Now, the energy is cheaper at night because used less at night. But why can you not personalize it depending on, real-time data? Smart home devices. I'm sure you guys heard about, thermostats and alarms and all that stuff, right? So a lot of that stuff that people talk about can be enabled because of those three things, which is less latency, faster, and higher density, right? How many have you heard about the Internet of Things? Internet of Things, IoT. So what is that? Basically, when I first heard about it, I scratched my head as well. What the heck is this? Basically, what it is Internet of Things is think of it as a bunch of subsystem sensors surrounding you. Today, you already have it, but you're going to have a lot more of it, okay? And when it's all connected, you have more real-time information. It becomes smarter. So if you go to a consumer electronics show in Las Vegas every year in January, every year they talk about smart, they talk about connectivity. It's all because of this Internet of Things, right? So, they would have showcases like you walk into a home kitchen, the refrigerator will know what you're lacking, will have ordered it online for you already. You can actually run a recipe, download it, and the oven or the stove would tailor to the right temperature and give you the recipe real time, right? Sort of doing the cooking for you. It tells you everything about what to do, right? You can send a message to your husband or wife, when is dinner ready. So all this connectivity is because they have a lot of sensors in the refrigerators, they have sensors in the cooktop, they have sensors in your ovens, they have sensors, able to wire to your, telephone or whatnot, right? A lot of that really cannot be done today because they don't have this communication capability like 5G. And with that, it's going to happen. Now, it's going to take probably the next 10 years to roll them all out. So I don't want you to think about, it's going to happen tomorrow. First of all the telephone company has got to put in all the cell towers. Then you have to go buy new 5G telephones. Then all this application is going to follow, right? But it will happen because the technology is already out there. It's only a matter of economics, how fast they can roll this out. Huawei leads in 5G technology implementation, bar none. I'm sure you guys heard a lot about the newspaper today about how the US government is concerned about Huawei's 5G technology. They're trying to stun, the Huawei's penetration into the US. They wanted to have companies, like Qualcomm, to catch up in the 5G implementation. But the cat is already out of the bag. Huawei is way ahead of everybody else. Okay, let's talk about mobile payments. That's the example I gave you about they don't take cash, they don't take credit card, they don't take mobile payments. Look at this number here. From 2013 to 2016, the transaction went from 3.8 billion to 97 billion transactions. And in terms of dollar value, in 10 months in 2017, the total value in terms of dollar transaction is $12.8 trillion compared to the United States in all of 2017, not just January to October, of $49.3 billion. I mean, the numbers are just staggering in terms of the differences. About 1 in 3 people uses mobile payment in China versus about 11%. Versus 11% in 2017. So again, let me share with you a personal story. When I was in Zhenjiang, this vinegar capital, it's actually not a small city, but a small city in the Chinese way of thinking about it, okay? So they don't have cab running in the street unless you go to a hotel. So in order to get a hotel, unless you get a taxi, people use apps called Didi, which is similar to Uber. If you don't have Didi on the street, good luck to you. You'll never find a cab. And if you find a cab, you cannot pay it because they only take mobile payments. So I learned that in Zhenjiang. I said, wait a minute. I go to China so often. I need to go solve this problem. So I went to a local, by the way, in order to have that Alipay or WeChat Pay, I have to have a Chinese bank account. I cannot have a US bank account. So, and I went to a local China bank and I said, I want to set this up for Alipay. And take me a while to do that. It's similar to my Chinese driver license story, but eventually I got it done, okay? Guess how much it cost me? 5 yuan, less than $1 in perpetuity from my account. No minimum payments, no minimum balance, less than $1. It's a one-time payment. And the clerk that did it is almost apologetic and telling me, well, I'm sorry, it's going to cost you 5 yuan, but I have to charge you with this piece of plastic card. I'm sitting there, oh my God, what are you talking about? I mean, $1. Then I went to a local cell phone store, and I said, I'm going to go need a local cell phone services. And they have this package deal, okay, that cost me $2 a month to subscribe to a local cell phone. So basically, for $3, I could have a mobile ATM machine in my hand. So that means it's very affordable, right? That's why you see those humongous number of mobile payment coming around. And they also have the advantage of no legacy system. In the US, what's our legacy? It's credit cards. They have no credit cards. So they just leapfrog the entire credit card cycle to mobile payments. And it's got big implications, because the minute you do that, you are stimulating a lot of other activities, because paying is so easy to do. And it's, like I said, it's another mobile ATM machine. So if I need some money, you just give me a hongbao, right? I collect money, I pay you back later. Very easy to do. Hongbao is a name for red packets, right? Basically, just giving you some money and you pay me later. So WeChat and Alipay account today for 93% of the China's mobile payment. Alipay is actually number 1. WeChat Pay is number 2. Union Pay is coming in. Chinese tourists, in case you have not noticed, they actually, a lot of merchants here talks about we accept Alipay. Have you seen that? Huh? We accept WeChat Pay, right? They're expecting to spend over $450 billion in the next 5 years. And majority of them prefer mobile payments because they don't need to carry cash with them. You know, when I travel overseas, I don't like to carry cash because I can go to the ATM machines, right, and get my money. This is even better. I don't even need to get to the ATM machines. Almost 80% of the smartphone user in China will be using payment, versus 23% for USA and 15% in Germany. And again, the implication there is easy to do business. when it's easy to do business, you're going to see a lot of economic opportunity comes out. So many Chinese cities are now the closest to a cashless society. They don't carry anything. You go to a store to give you a QR code. You scan it, you pay it. That's the end of it. Okay, let's talk about high-speed rails. Remember I told you that size of US, very comparable to the size of China, very comparable to the size of Europe, right? What that means is they really, when you look at the Chinese economic development, a lot of the migrant workers were moving from the inner part of China to go to the coastal areas to work, right? So China is really determined to build the infrastructure so that they can move people. And their goal is they can move from one city to the next city in less than 3 hours to the extent as possible, certainly less than a day. So one way to do that is high-speed rails. They have the fastest and the largest high-speed rail network in the world, 19,000 miles. Most of it was built in the last decade. I mean, when I was in Hangzhou and I went to Shanghai, you sit in this high-speed rail is something else. I mean, it's better than a first-class cabin when you go to a business class seat. You get a lounge, okay? It's very comfortable, and in less than an hour from Hangzhou, you're in Shanghai. In the U.S., do we see any rail? Forget about high-speed rails. You know what happened? In 1945, the oil companies and the car companies spent a very big lobbying effort to get rid of rails because they want people to drive. So all the rail system kind of died by the wayside. And the U.S. really, this high-speed rail that Governor Brown talks about, my friend is my school friend is the chief engineer in terms of working on the consultation of that. Every now and then when I see, his name is Thomas, he will tell me, I don't know if it ever happens. Whatever happens. I mean, this is a rail that they're talking about, go from nowhere to nowhere, that they're talking about right now. And I didn't even mention about freeway in here. When I was in Tibet twice, between the last 2 times, the number of highway that they are building is staggering. They are drilling through mountains, okay, to tunnels to connect different parts. Just go to the website, you just punch in Chinese highway. It was astounding, the kind of highway they built. So what they're doing basically is connecting people and places to make sure that they provide economic, opportunities for people that are in the inner part of China versus the coastal areas. And then when you do that, you provide mobility, you stimulate economic activities. How about electric cars? If you go to China and you get a taxi, chances are you're in one of the electric cars. The number of vehicles in the first quarter of this year reaches about 250,000 cars in China. It jumped from 117,000. So they more than double between year to year. In February last year, there's 3.2 million electrical cars, but 1.2 million of them is in China, and about 750,000 in the USA. Now in here, you hear about Tesla, you hear about Volt, you hear about all these cars, right? You go to China, I mean, they're everywhere. You look at it, I never thought about their electrical cars, but they're electrical cars. Okay, now let's talk about supercomputers. How many of you have heard about Cray? Cray Research, right? For the people that knows, Cray Research used to be in Mountain View. They're no longer there anymore. Okay, the supercomputers are very critical in terms of research and development and discovery because of the number of times and how fast they can crunch data. And you need that for modeling and simulations. The race to build the first exascale supercomputer is on between the 2 countries. So what is that? That's a billion to billion calculation per second. Just think about that number for a minute. 10 to the 18 per second instructions. That's called the exaflop. Flop is a floating, a point is one of the way in terms of how they calculate. But don't worry about it, okay? And in 2012, U.S. had the fastest supercomputer. They call it the U.S. Titan. They can do 27 petaflops, which is 1,000,000 billion instructions per second. In 2017, China overcome that by producing a supercomputer that can do 125 petaflops. Guess what? That's not long, because U.S. 2018, U.S. retake the lead again. They can do 200 petaflops. To put it in perspective, a 200 petaflop is equal to a person, every person on Earth, to do a calculation every second of a day for 305 days. And a computer to do it in the blink of an eye. I mean, this computer is like the size of a building. It's not a desktop anymore. Okay? Those are tremendous amount of parallel processing that goes on all the time. So when you can do this kind of a calculation, you can actually afford a lot of modeling and simulations before you really, try the real thing. A friend of mine was in the worked for Texaco at one time, and this is about 30 years ago now. And his job was when Texaco was trying to figure out where they have oil, they would have a boat pull up all the sonic buoys. And this sonic buoy would ping the ocean floor all the time. So they would collect a contour in terms of what the ocean floor looked like. And they would guess what's the probability where there are oil sitting over there. Okay? And at that time, every foot they drill for oil is $1 million. So it's a lot of money, right? And he used to tell me, a terabyte of data I have to go fix. Today, terabyte of data is like nothing. All of you guys probably have it at home, right? So this supercomputer allows people to do stuff like that, modeling, in a power that you've never thought about possible. As of November of last year, US have 5 of the fastest supercomputer. China has 2. But China have 206 supercomputer, and the US have 124. So they may not be as fast, they make it up in numbers. Okay, I'm sure you guys heard about artificial intelligence, right? Let's talk about that. So first of all, let me tell you what AI is not about. How many of you guys have seen the movie Space Odyssey 2001? Right? Remember there's a computer called HAL? It's pretty scary, right? So first let me tell you, it is not HAL. AI is not HAL. You need to get that out of your system here. But what it is, AI is the ability, that to be able to perform certain cognitive functions. So the example of technology that AI solve are like autonomous vehicles. The autonomous vehicles enabled by AI, because with all the sensors, stuff like that in the car, they have got to differentiate a cat walking across the street versus a lady in a wheelchair. Or versus, it's got to be able to see all that stuff and process it and be right the first time as you are driving. And all that is really enabled by AI, right? So what are some of the exciting things about AI? Now I'm going to go through a bunch of terminology. Don't worry too much about it, okay? But it has got some meaning that I want to share with you. First of all, in order to have AI, you have to have a tremendous amount of data set to train the system, right? Let me just call the system the computer for a minute, okay? To learn about, what this is, right? To differentiate a cat from a lady in a wheelchair, for example. And they call that a machine learning. So machine is learning, right, about what you're telling them on a very large data sets. Now, there's a big difference between US and China. In US, privacy is valued a lot more than in China. I probably have hundreds of my mug shot already taken in China without me knowing about it. Because as I drive, from one place to another place, there are all these cameras on the highway taking pictures, right? Because they have a very large data set, they actually is easier for them to train the system to do facial recognition, for example. So this machine learning algorithm detects the patterns, and they start making predictive analytics about this is what it is. And it gets better and better and better over time. And then there's another way of the machine learning called deep learning, which is another escalation of how the computer learns. So as an example of that, let me apply that to a fact that has happened. I'm sure most of you heard about Go, right? That is an ancient Chinese game. It's played on a 19x19 board. Very simple. You put pieces, in the cross section, and you win by capturing real estate. You surround a real estate, that's your land, right? And then you count the number of empty spaces that you capture. This game is supposed to be out of reach of computers. You have chess game, and this is supposed. Why? The number of moves on a Go game exceeds the number of atoms in the world. Because it's so simple. You can put a piece anywhere. So this is kind of like the holy grail of computers. That can never get done. Well, guess what? The DeepMind in London, which is out Google, produced this game that defeated a Korean Go master 4-1 in October 2015. That was big news. The way how they did that, they sent 10,000 grandmaster Go games into the computer. And the computer learned day and night, to the point where the programmer don't even know what the computer is going to do. Now that is artificial intelligence, right? Guess what? They have 3 more successes. Next one is Alpha Go Master. They beat a Chinese Go Master in a 3-game match. Then, a few months later, AlphaGo Zero, by the way, I don't know why they come up with all these names. The AlphaGo Zero beat the AlphaGo Master 100-0. And then in December 2018, the Alpha Zero was introduced, and they beat AlphaGo Zero 60-40. The reason why I'm bringing this to you is I want you to know this thing is moving really, really fast. Now, here's the good news and the bad news. The good news is they can continue to produce computers that play better Go games. The bad news is that's the only thing this computer knows what to do. They cannot do shopping for you. They cannot turn on light for you. They can only play Go. And this is kind of the limit of artificial intelligence today. You train them to do one thing, they do one thing exceptionally well, but they don't know how to do anything else after that. Okay, so I'm going to show you some of the artificial. So first of all, this on the left is a robot that's making coffee. And you can find it in Berkeley and in San Francisco. The one on the right is robot in the Amazon fulfillment center. There's no people in there anymore. This is a female in a Japanese retail store telling you what to do when you walk in there, because Japan is actually having a lot of problem with manpower, right? Guess what? This is a news anchor in China. It's fake, run by artificial intelligence. Just to show gender equality, they also have a man in China doing English AI anchors. So all of this is happening as we are speaking right now. Okay, so Boston Consulting Group talk about the implementation study in December of these managers. To make a long story short, China is leading in the AI globally in that. And one of the reasons why is in 2017, China actually have another one of those national initiatives to promote AI. So let me touch base on internet connectivity here for a few minutes. This is a graph talking about the number of bits, number of information that can transmit it, right? The important thing here is in 2010, the worldwide IP traffic exceeded 20 billion gigabytes. But in 2017, it went above that, like nothing. But 90% of the world's data were produced in the last 2 years. That means it's happening really, really fast here. Now, what has happened? What I mean is the internet environment in China is getting very competitive because there's opportunities and everybody goes onto it. And either you survive or you die. On the average in 2018, a unicorn is a private company that's valued over $1 billion in capitalization. They want produced every 38 days. That tells you about the economic opportunity there. And they are aggressively targeting areas that you may not be familiar with in Southeast Asia, India, Latin America, Africa. 44 of the 100 top apps in India and 5 of the top mobile apps are developed by China. Those are countries you haven't heard about, right? Alibaba and WeChat are investing billions of dollars every year. As a matter of fact, the way you can find out is Alibaba generated almost $6.4 billion on tech investments. Those are return on investment. And WeChat generated almost 18%. Didi, basically, Uber has thrown the towel and sold itself in China to Didi. Uber used to be in China. They have 30 million trips per day completed on the Didi platform. And they're aggressively moving into other places. Meituan, you may not have heard about it, but if you're in Beijing, I guarantee you have seen their motorcycles. They're the world's largest online, offline platforms, okay? And their goal is to serve 1 billion customers around the world every day. And what they do, one of the things that I'm very familiar with that is you have an order, okay, and they will ship your food to whoever you want. A lot of my friends actually order for the aging parents. They don't have to cook, and Meituan service that. Total, this is something that you may not heard about, okay? This is a company that uses machine learning, artificial intelligence, to tailor the news that you get, personalize it, based on what you like, what you don't like, and your reaction to the news, right? So this is very dangerous, right? You tend to get the thing you like, and you keep looking at the thing you like, and pretty soon you ignore the opposing, opinion. So who wins the technology race? I think US and China are both leaders. And I don't think that anyone can say, and they're moving too fast for you to figure out anyway. Okay, and then there are a lot of geopolitical things. I think Clay kind of talked a little bit about that, showing all the different things. The world leadership and influence, China have a saying, right? One mountain cannot have 2 tigers. So this is what's happening. The 2 tigers are fighting it out. The trade war that you hear, to me, is like a technology war. It's not a trade war, even though they talk about trade imbalances. But the sticking point with all this stuff is really technology. And the access to market, the talent, the technology is behind all this stuff. The one thing that I worry about most is the US-China relationship will never be the same anymore. And that is very harmful in a way in terms of future development in the global order. Okay, so what enables technology development? I would say there's 5 things. There's the government, there is knowledge, human resources, finance, and return on investments on business opportunities. So let's talk about government. If you look at US Congress, our average age of senator is 62, and congressman is 58. China, until President Xi Jinping changes it, actually have a mandatory retirements and term limits. Mostly lawyers in the US Congress. In China, it's mostly engineers. Technology companies are a source of concern in the US. Talk about privacy, they talk about antitrust. They have very poor understanding between government and technology sector. A lot of it is the technology company's fault. We hardly do any lobbying in Washington. The company, the sector, they do a lot of work is pharmaceutical, defense, agriculture. Technology doesn't stay there. China has got a totalitarian government, right? So they have long-range planning in terms of the 2025 national goals. One of the most famous, how many of you guys seen Orrin Hatch talking to Mark Zuckerberg on TV? Yeah. What did he say? How do you make money? I mean, you look at it, how can a senator ask a question like that? But that's what he did. Okay, in knowledge base, I want you to see the US still have the best schools, okay? But China graduates more engineers. 15% of the college grad in the US have STEM degrees. 40% in China has STEM degrees. Now, another very significant thing is 90% of the college students graduate in China. In the US, less than a third, about a third graduate in 4 years, about 50% graduate in 6 years in public universities. In private universities, it's a little better. It's about 50% graduate in 4 years, and about 60% graduated in 6 years. Now, they have a lot, better quality of life in the US, which is why a lot of foreign students stay, right? We have venture capitalists, angel investors, you go for IPO, and so there's a lot of positive in the US, but China also have a lot of things to offer. Now, one thing that China has to worry about is a shrinking population growth, right? So something they have to fix. Okay, what's the implication of the current technology development? First of all, I mean, the first industrial revolution is a steam engine. Then you have electricity. Then you have electronic, and information technology. Every single one of them makes significant changes. So the current industrial revolution is, what do I call the digital revolution? Now, the digital revolution is all about connectivity. They connect people together. The opportunity I already talked about in terms of AI, robotics, nanotechnology, all this. So all of this has opened up new markets, new opportunities, and every generation have increased productivity, quality, lower cost, expanded mobility, and so on and so forth. They're all good stuff, right? So when people have cars, for example, they might get rid of all the horses business, but the cars produce satellite cities. And all of a sudden, you have all the suburbs building up and creating more jobs. But this industrial revolution is a little bit different because they actually have a lot more innovation and in many different sectors. And it's not just lots. It's happening in dizzying speed. And the knowledge worker have significantly better opportunities. So when jobs are disappearing, because of robots and stuff like that, the people that programs the robots have good jobs, right? It's the people that are stacking the shelves, those are the jobs that have risk. So I'm going to give you a closing remarks in a minute, okay? And I have an ask for all the teachers here. That's my request for you. So in April 1961, this is where the space race happened. President Kennedy gave this, need a human movement. And then 1969, we just landed the 50th anniversary, right? By the way, in 1998, the International Space Station have 15 countries collaborated on this international. So it's no longer a race. It's more like a collaborations, right? So what I want you to think about is they don't have to be a race, right? In the 80s, when Japan was coming up as a semiconductor threat to the US, we actually have this term called competition, which collaboration and competition. The lines between competition blur because they have all of these opportunities here, right? And there's many opportunities and breakthroughs that both countries can work together, much like the International Space Stations. But we need talents. We need STEM talents in the US. So my ask for you is encourage your student to be interested in STEM. Why? Look at the average age of a NASA engineer. 28 years old in 1969. In 2014, the average age is 47. And this year, I bet you it's closer to 50. 15% of 20 million college students equal to 3 million potential STEM graduates. China's college student enrollment is very similar to US today. They have a lot more population, but less people go to colleges. But because of the 40%, they have 8 million potential STEM graduates. So you can see the differences here, right? A lot of the students in our school think about math, science is difficult. You need to get them to think about it's a lot more fun, a lot more impactful, all right? When I was asked to do a presentation to the kids about engineering, what I did was I got a bunch of peanut butters and crackers. And I asked a 6th grader to build the biggest and the largest peanut butter cracker bridge you can do. I said, that's engineering. You have to make it interesting, for them so they don't think about the challenge and difficulties related to study that. And we need them, and we need them badly. Okay, so thank you for your attention. I know I kind of run, above the time limit here. Sorry about that. Okay.